Welcome so much. Welcome so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to High Arts Staff Share. So if you've been following, you might have noticed that we're doing a month of health and wellness in a variety of different ways. We're supporting you get healthier, and we're also supporting ourselves get healthier. And we're featuring a few discussions and conversations about what that means. We thought that it would be really beneficial to turn the camera within, not just talk about health and wellness out there in the world, but really amongst ourselves, in the company of y'all watching, about what it's like to work at High Arts and how health and wellness are prioritized in the organization. So my name is Kirya Traber. My pronouns are she, her. I am on Lenape land in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a light brown skinned woman with wire frame glasses and a top bun on my head. I'm wearing a yellow shirt, and there are plants on shelves behind me. And at High Arts, I am the curator in residence. And I'd like to introduce you to the rest of the staff. Erin, will you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, I'm Aaron McKinney, Aaron L. McKinney, and I am the general manager at High Arts. Pronouns he, him, his. I am on Lenape land, now known as Brooklyn, New York. And I am a caramel brown male with high top fade, goatee. I have a plant to my left shoulder and a colorful painting behind me. I'm wearing a checkerboard button-up Oxford shirt and a blue sweater. And I will pass it to Eleanor.
Hi, I am Eleanor Kipping, marketing associate at High Arts. My pronouns are she, her. I am a light-skinned Black woman. My hair is natural and pulled back in a poof. I'm wearing a black and white checkered sweater and black cat-eye glasses. To my right is a bookshelf behind me, and to my left is a windowed curtain. I'm going to pass it to Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole Emerald. I am the project associate at High Arts. Pronouns she, her, and I am a Brazilian woman with long black hair that's down. I'm wearing a striped sweater that's white and brown, and to my right is my bed, and to my left is a closet. And I'm also on Lenape land in Brooklyn. I'm going to pass it to Hanna.
Hi, I'm Hanna. I'm the development manager at High Arts. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm also on Lenape and Canarsie land in what's now Brooklyn. For a visual description, I have a rainbow painting behind me. I have light brown skin and dark curly hair that's shoulder length, and I'm wearing a teal shirt and glasses. And now I'll pass it to Gerard.
Great. Hello, everyone. I am Gerard Manaya. I am the marketing fellow at High Arts. My pronouns are he, they, them. A little bit of my visual description. I have a mixed colored bandana scarf on my head with twists. I am a brown skin Afro-Latino with glasses and a medium beard, burgundy scarf around my neck. And let's see, land acknowledgement. I'm currently sitting on the unceded lands of the Munsee Lenape Wapinga peoples. And it's also tuning in from Glenwood, New Jersey. And I think I will pass it to Raymond.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Raymond Cotterington. I'm the executive director of High Arts. I am calling in from Lenape land in Brooklyn. My physical description, my description is I'm a brown-skinned male, short hair, little bit of salt and pepper in the beard. I'm sitting behind me is a exercise bike and a dresser, and I believe that's it.
Thank you all. So you've just met this beautiful team of folks at High Arts, but those who have been following for a minute know that we haven't always had a team. In fact, for a long time, for about the first few of the last 5 years, it was just two. And so I really want to kick it off with Aaron and Raymond. When you first took over leadership of High Arts, Was health and wellness something at the front of your mind? What did you think about it then, if you talked about it explicitly, and how have you seen it shift?
Sure. I mean, I'll kick it off. Thanks for the question and thanks for the conversation. It's good to be able to have some time and think about these things, because oftentimes there's less attention paid to them as an organization. So when we started, I don't think it was an explicit idea. It was something that was in the ether. And when I thought about health, I thought about organizational health first and foremost, but then the idea about creating a space that was non-toxic, supportive, was needed, because it was such a heavy lift in terms of the work that we had to do. So health and wellness became more of a focus. The longer we went, the more we were at the organization, the more people that were added. So it really became more of a priority, because the work it's a lot of work in arts nonprofit sector work. It can be draining, and it's a lot of work. It's a very heavy number of responsibilities people have. You're wearing multiple hats. So as we move forward, we started to become more explicit about this health question, and really what it meant, in the context of high arts, because I don't think it's a one size fits all kind of formula for each organization. It has to be very specific to the people, the organization, and the work that you're doing. Aaron, you want to say anything?
Sure. I mean, for me, I came in like a year after Raymond had already been there. And for me, no, I would say health and wellness probably was not at the top of the list. It was more about learning the organization. I was familiar with the organization, worked with the organization through partnerships with other organizations, but not, really in the organization. And so really learning the organization, learning Raymond's leadership style, learning, the history of the organization, and then catching up on where, as far as general management, where the organization was, what needed to be done. Just kind of learning the lay of the land, I think was like for the first year for me was really learning the lay of the land, and not really focused on health, because I think that first year was a lot of long hours, catching up on some things, figuring out some things. So it was quite a bit. And also with Raymond being, the first lead of the organization that was not a founder of the organization, and kind of just that whole change of leadership, and trying to, figure out, listening to him articulate the vision, and then trying to figure out how to execute that vision, while, bringing in the new leadership, but also keeping in mind the foundation that had already been laid.
It's something that we talked about in a prior conversation that I thought was really interesting, is how the two of you come from really different backgrounds and different approaches to the art. And something that you'd said in a conversation, Aaron, was you had to learn to really listen. And I think that's something that has continued to stay infused in the way the working culture is at High Arts. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit right now.
Sure. That was, I think, one of my biggest growth curves was, having a leader that was not necessarily coming from artistic background. And Raymond can talk a little bit about his background. So it was, how I'm used to articulating or communicating from the artistic side was a little different for someone that has an analytical background. And so, I would try to explain something, and, Raymond would ask questions, and I'm like, he's not listening to me. He's just not getting it. But then once I stopped and thought about it, it was like, oh, wait, he is getting it. He's trying to understand it. And so, and then as time passed, I was more in tune with, why he would ask questions and the type of questions he would ask. And that way I could hopefully answer them before he even asked them. And then it felt great just to know that, number one, I felt like I was listening to him, and I could tell in his decision-making and the conversation that he was definitely listening to me. Like, he was definitely taking note. He was, I could tell he was picking up some of the artistic language that maybe he had not been using before. So I think it was very important that we learned to listen to each other, just so that we could continue to communicate effectively and get the work done.
Yeah, I was actually today years old when I learned that I should be calling you Dr. Codrington, Raymond. I didn't realize that you had come from an academic background. And
I haven't been doing that, so please do. I'm joking.
Well, I'm curious if you could talk about, and something else that came up in a prior conversation is an experience you had early in your career that you brought with you to High Arts when you thought about shaping an organization, shaping your leadership style. And this was about like creating an environment. Maybe you could talk about that.
Sure. So, when I got to High Arts, I thought about sort of what have been the positive experiences, professional experiences I have, what have been the best professional settings, where have I excelled, and how can I bring that here? And that was really a thought back to really my first job at a graduate school, which is a postdoctoral fellowship at the Field Museum in Chicago, at a place called the Center for Cultural Understanding and Change. And there it was pretty open environment. It was led by a person of color. There was a lot of space to grow, a lot of space to learn. There was some space to try different things out without a serious concern for failure. It was really more of an iterative learning, incubation, and development space. So I wanted to bring some of that to High Arts, but also thought it was important to create that space for people that, from marginalized groups or people of color, however you want to frame it. The idea that this should be an environment where people who come from jobs, organizations where they may not have had that. They may not have had that freedom to try different things out. Maybe they weren't learning. When you're trying to sort of recreate something, you think that, or when you're in a situation that's ideal, say I was an ideal situation at the Field Museum, you kind of assume things are going to be like that moving forward. Like it's going to be like this in my next job, but it wasn't. So I was always thinking about how can I recreate that whenever I have an opportunity, when I have influence at a space or in an organization, where I'm able to sort of shape the policy, shape the space, shape the practices. I want to bring that sense of freedom, that sense of innovation, that sense of being able to learn and to make mistakes and not be sort of reprimanded for it. So that's really what I wanted to create at High Arts. I wanted to create a space where it was collegial. It was really where, as people had done for me before, is really to create that space, create space for thought, create space for comfort, create space for support. And really that's what we try to do at High Arts in a bunch of ways. There's specific things that we've done. They're very general things that we've done, but we try to do that with our artists. We've also tried to do that for our staff. And it's become, over the past year and a half, 2 years, that values conversation and codifying that. So what does that mean has become much more important.
And I want to lift up something you said and not skirt past it, because I think that that's a really big part of why this conversation is even happening. This is a POC, Black-led organization, a Black-founded organization, a Black and brown staff. That's rare. It's rare in the arts field. It's rare in any field. And the fact that you thought about that intentionally as you came into leadership, I think, is no small thing. I'm curious, if we could talk a little more specifically, what are some of the things concretely that happen at High Arts that are maybe instituted or even casually part of the culture that you think, and anyone can answer this, that make it a space where wellness is valued?
I can start. We have human interactions during meetings, even over Zoom, which is really nice. Whether that's a check-in at the beginning of the conversation or just, actually asking how are you and caring about the answer. I think it's easy to get into the mindset of meetings and emails all day long, and we don't forget about each other's humanity.
Human interactions and meetings, that's great. What are some other examples of things that people have experienced at this workplace that are instituted, that are part of the culture, that are unique in the work field?
One of the things that I will speak on is whenever we have meetings, we try not to do back-to-back meetings so then we don't get burned out. Also, we try not to do super early meetings so then we can actually be prepared for the meeting. And we also, we have like bi-weekly virtual happy hours where we can talk as human beings and like get to know each other outside of like the workspace, So all of that helps us come together as a team, and also realize that we're all human beings, and makes it easier for all of us to say hey, I need a day for myself because of this and that.
It's amazing how something as simple as, hey, let's not schedule back-to-back meetings is a game changer, right? It's often these little things, I think, that are taken for granted as, well, we have to push through. And that's something actually that came up in an earlier conversation. The idea of keeping the priorities in check, remembering that this isn't a for-profit institution, that in fact, it's never going to be about the bottom dollar. It's got to be about the people first. Does anyone want to speak to that? Sort of how you've seen that show up in the work at High Arts?
Sure. I mean, like you said, this is not we're an arts nonprofit. You can't really run a nonprofit organization like a Fortune 500 or a for-profit company. People that generally, I'll speak in general, that if you're working in a nonprofit, you're probably very mission driven. And I think the question becomes, when something is mission driven, how does an organization incentivize work and productivity? How do you create a space? How do you create the space where people want to work? I think that for me, I'm always trying to think about, this is the vision of the organization. I'd like you to come with me on this journey that we're going to go down, that's going to serve the mission, that's going to create the work. And, I want you to understand how you fit into this. And that's a very specific kind of approach that's more kind of facilitator, traffic cop, conductor kind of thing that I've tried to bring into the organization. And hopefully, so people can see themselves in the work and feel like they're contributing, while at the same time being able to hold part of themselves, keep themselves whole. So not giving everything to the organization, still remaining human, realizing that we do have priorities, especially in the past year where it's been so difficult to actually get work done. It's important to not lose oneself and really think about, this is the work, but then I also have a life. You have to have a life. You have to, work-life balance. People always talk about that. Let's actually practice that, to take hard pauses, to take hard stops, to step off the hamster wheel, or, just stop working. Do something else. Go see your family. Go see your friends. Take some time. Get your head together. Those are things that are very. They can be done deliberately. They can be done casually. But we've actually kind of built that into the work here. And I'll just say one more thing about priorities. I think that priorities can shift, but I think the priorities are driven from, two things. One is really listening, and one is really watching. You have to be able to gauge where people are, because you can't really just drive people into their ground. You can't just go all the time. You have to take time off. You have to be able to really, take a moment to remember about the humanity, which helps you remember why you do the work, which also ultimately leads to productivity. So it's a weird kind of loop, stopping to be more productive, but that's where we are. That's where I feel we are. So anybody else should really jump in.
Yeah, you mentioned, you name checked the pandemic, so perhaps we should just go there. And so we're an arts institution, and it's been a hard year for the arts. How has High Arts responded to that, and how have you, as individual staff members, felt yourself responding to that in this moment?
I guess I'll start off this one. It was fortunately, unfortunately, unfortunate for the pandemic, but fortunate for High Arts. It forced us to pause. It forced us to take a step back, because we were working hard, and we were enjoying the work we were doing. We were enjoying the artists that we were working with, but it forced us, because we couldn't present any work, to kind of stop, step back, look at what we were doing, how we were doing it, and question if we could do it more effectively, more efficiently, and even with more strength. Speaking of values, like if we could display those more or articulate them even better. And so for us, as an organization, it gave us the time to step back, pause, question a lot of stuff, do a lot of strategic planning, which was much needed, which I think has helped us present art in an even, better way and more direct and more strategic way. And then personally, it's just, it was hard. And having the space individually to process like what was happening. I mean, there were constant check-ins as far as like, hey, how are you doing with this? Like, how are you feeling right now? When things would happen, we would definitely like discuss it because it was important, especially for an institution of, made up of individuals of color, that we discuss what was happening, in the moment, at the moment, to really figure out, how do we move forward, or how do we process this information, or how do we even respond to it? Just because, it affected us all in many various different ways that, and like Raymond said, it was very important to listen. And shout out to him. I think he did an excellent job of listening and watching throughout just to make sure kind of everybody was okay, or at least appeared to be okay.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. Both Eleanor and Gerard, you started at High Arts in the middle of a pandemic. And I'm curious if either of you would like to speak to what that's like starting at this institution. Are there things you've experienced that have been unexpected, have been helpful in navigating this moment?
Sure, I can speak to that. I mean, I will say, for those of us who have started a job in the middle of a pandemic working remotely, it's quite difficult. But when I interviewed for the position, and one of the things that was spoken to me, many of the things that were spoken to me were in the vein of what we're talking about now. When I asked, how have you been supporting your artists, and how have you been supporting your staff and your community at this time? And it was, well, we've slowed down, and we've really taken advantage of this time and used it as a time to stop focusing on productivity, but to really evaluate what we're about as an institution, and what we want to be for our communities. And I was like, sold, I'm hired. And and here I am. And it's been as challenging as it is to make such a big transition during this time. It's been a breath of fresh air to be surrounded by folks who I don't need to explain why, some things are difficult to experience or witness that we're seeing in the news. I don't have to explain what it's like to walk down the street in my person, and the stress that might come with that. And in addition to that, it's also shared. That experience is shared because we are all POCs. Not that we all have the same experiences and interpretations of these experiences, but there's an understanding. And then it goes forward to our artists as well. So it starts like really, really small and micro, and then goes out into the community that we are representing, that we represent the community that we're supporting. So yeah, and I saw, a lot of institutions really focusing on productivity at this time. And I think that like staying healthy is radical and productive. So here we are.
Yeah, Gerard, did you want to add?
Sure, I'll add, that was beautifully said, Eleanor. I second that. And I think something that I would add, if anything, it's been, as mentioned before, it's been about really what Dr. Codrington said earlier, which is learning to listen, right? For me, it's been learning to listen to myself and my needs, learning to slow down. And it's been kind of a mixed bag of emotions, that act, especially as a marketing fellow who's joining a program that's intended for me to like learn and grow and also do. That there was a reprogramming that I needed to like step into for myself, and an unlearning to allow myself to rest, to slow down as well. Even in a new environment that I was entering, that I'm still navigating that. There's just pre-pandemic, a lot of notions within organizations of, go, being on the hamster wheel, as was mentioned before. And, during this pandemic, a lot of organizations have slowed down, and a lot have also, picked up the speed of work. And that, I think it's something to consider of the impact that has on our community, right? During this time, particularly when there's loss and a lot of grieving going on. And, if is that time allowed for people to slow down, to step away, to listen, and to not feel guilty about that. So there's like that juggling too around that. And I feel that, in this environment of high arts, it's been one where it's for me, it's been hard to navigate that of like learning to slow down, just because I've been so programmed as a New Yorker to like go to this thing and go to this. Like pre-pandemic, I must have had 8 things going on in one day, like for 7 days of the week. Like I was just go, go, go. And I'm sure many of you can relate. And so still learning that, right? To allow that slowing down to just and be easy and cool about it. But knowing that there's also things that should be done, but understanding that there's awareness and care. If that's involved, then I think we're good.
Thank you, Gerard. And I'm actually I want to respond and insert myself into this conversation a little bit as well. So as curator in residence, I'm not full-time. And I have I also started my term just before pandemic. And then we were just getting to the swing of it for 3 months. And then here we were, the whole world changed. And I want to name what you said, Gerard, about allowing oneself to slow down. That internal struggle is so, as a New Yorker, as someone who's trying to cut her teeth in the performing arts in New York, as someone who has been inside predominantly white institutions for all of my professional life, that permission is really hard to sit with. That permission is really hard to allow myself. That was something that sort of swamped me in the beginning of the pandemic. And I think what's unique and what I've truly found is I'm used to being in institutions where I might have to battle for that in the institution, demand that for others while I'm not even practicing it myself. And I'm the one sort of on the vanguard pushing that. What I have found coming to high arts is that's already a collective value. It's already met. And I find that to be incredibly rare. It hasn't really happened for me in my professional life. And I found it, as you're sort of saying, Gerard, I found it necessary, not only in global pandemic, but in the wake of the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement. I found myself so grateful to be at this institution. I know that many of us have come from predominantly white institutions in the past. Not to name check anybody. We're not. This is not a tea session, but unless we want it to be. But I'm curious if anyone else could speak to sort of what has been the experience of coming to a POC-led and centered organization. How has that shifted for you personally, or what have you observed?
I can chime in. Because I think it's both coming from predominantly white institutions and nonprofits, and also just that nonprofits, for the most part, are built with these white systems, whether or not they're led by a white executive director. There are other people of color on staff. So I can relate to what Gerard was saying, or maybe it was you, Kirya, about like unlearning and deprogramming ourselves from what we've learned since we were children and in school, and like trying to prove that we're the best. And I think we're a group of like overachievers. We already know how to work hard. So by us saying like we know how to rest, that doesn't mean we're not working hard. That doesn't mean we're not passionate about the mission. As Raymond was saying earlier, all of that can be true at once. And when I started, I felt like I had already done some unlearning of that. Like I felt I had spent the last 5 years, and specifically the last year, like really working my stuff out to realize that, I'm more than my productivity. But it wasn't until the pandemic, and it wasn't until this job, that I really started to feel it and embody it. And I think that's a direct result of the work culture that, was already existing before I started.
Anyone else want to speak to that?
I mean, I think that, Eleanor, do you want to go, Eleanor? Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, I was just going to comment on the unlearning. I remember, I think it was like my first couple of weeks here, you all were like, girl, you need to slow down. Like, it's okay. It's okay to like, to slow down. And like, I remember having a conversation that went along the lines of like, you know, take your time settling in, get to learn the company, the organization, get to learn the position and really find your place in it. And that was for me where it was like, oh, this isn't just like a feeling that I have about this place. This is it in practice. And I don't need to fight for it myself. People are also going to advocate for me and be like, hey, something's not right. Let's address that. And I was like, oh, I'm safe. And that was like, I think the first moment when I was like, I don't just think I'm safe. I actually am safe. And that was really lovely.
Raymond, go ahead.
I mean, I think it's a balance that you have to find. Don't want everybody think like, we're just going like 50%. Like everyone's working super hard, and we do rest, but it is about the work. Ultimately, it's about the work. And I think for High Arts, it seems to be, I think, both deliberately and by chance attracting a certain kind of person that either seeks that kind of environment or feels comfortable working in this kind of environment. Because it's, like you said at the beginning of the conversation, we went from 2, and now, it's like now we're going to be something like 7, and consultants and all that stuff like that. So there's a constellation of people keeping this going. And I think that there's some value added for people that work here that want to be in an organization that's either led by or predominantly staffed by people of color. I think it means something to them. It's a different kind of work environment. It's no less rigorous, but I think there's just a recognition of a sense of wholeness, a sense of, not having to overperform or outperform your colleagues. You don't have to be, for me, I don't have to be this sort of super Black man, super Negro that does everything, that fits in every social situation, can pull off every professional thing you ask me of to do if I wasn't in an environment like this. And that's important. And I think that, some of the pressures of being a person of color in other kinds of work settings become internalized. I think they end up hurting your productivity. You're so busy. There's so many factors. There's so much other stuff going on. It's taking away from your work. And more broadly, in the pandemic, I think we had to take a hard pause and think about priorities and think about values. So while a lot of organizations, while there was, I think, an impulse for High Arts to think about work, productivity, scaling up. Let's get everything online. Let's get our archive online. That wasn't going to work for us. Instead, let's think about how we're going to do this work, why we're doing this work. Let's talk to our artists. We're an organization that's sort of built around supporting artists, helping them move their work to the next stage, the next iteration. How are we going to do that in a pandemic? How are we going to do that remotely? Let's really sit down and be deliberate and think about that. And while you've inserted yourself into the conversation, but you're also being very modest, because part of that conversation also was values. And then how do the values show up in the language that's on our website, in the way that we're dealing with artists moving forward? How are we selecting them? How are we working with them? How are we giving them resources? Where's the reciprocity in this relationship, in this dynamic between organization, artists, staff, and the work? So there are a lot of things that went on that were very deliberate. So I don't want to, some things happen by chance, but I think getting their priorities down during the early stages of the pandemic, and having people that could also respond and be productive in this really cacophonous and stressful, broader, between the BLM stuff, between the BLM work and movement in the pandemic, and then, and 3 other pandemics around, gender, around family. It's like so many things going on. And for me personally, I have an 8-year-old, so I'm the 9:30 math teacher. So I'm always thinking about that. So my priorities are, work is super important to me, but, if I don't get that math problem right, my daughter's gonna be like, Daddy, you're whack. So, I have to have certain priorities as well. So it all balances out for me. And I imagined that everybody else while they don't have children, have equally pressing priorities in their life that they also need to balance out with work. So let's give each other space to do that. And, you know, we're as strong as we've ever been. We're as productive as we've ever been. You know, we can always use more money, but we've actually been relatively productive in seeking and gaining new funding. And it's an exciting time for the organization that, you know, ironically has come through and this kind of synced up with the pandemic. So, you know, I think that's a credit to everybody kind of on this call, and some systems that we put in place, but also the values that have been implicit in a lot of ways in the organization, but became really, really implicit and concretized over the past year. So I think the timing has been great for the organization.
Well, thank you. And I want to sort of string together something. I saw you, Aaron, and I'll call on you just a sec. But I heard a couple of us, even in this call, even as we so, you know, adamantly center wellness in our work, even as we've named that we can do this here and we're unlearning, I heard twice or maybe 3 times people say, it's not that we're not productive. It's not that we're at 50%. And I want to challenge us right now. And I want to say, maybe we are at 50% and it's our best 50%. You know, maybe it's not about being at 100% all the time towards our work in order to be able to show up and do the work that needs to be done.
No, but 50 is low. 50 is low. Like 60. No joke. No, what? No, it's really though. No, it's a good point. I think it's the best at what you have at that moment, and it's
right.
No one's ever, even in best of times, no one's ever really at 100%.
Right.
I mean, you know, but to be able to pull off work in this setting is, I think, is a feat in and of itself. And like to not lose your mind in all this craziness that's happening all the time, 24-hour news cycle, all the stuff that's going on. You know, but maintain some kind of focus. And it's okay. Like, you know, sometimes you have to check out. Sometimes you just can't. You just can't deal. Every call doesn't have to be a Zoom call. Maybe you just want to get on the phone. Maybe you just need to step away from the work for a minute. But you have to build those moments, those opportunities in as part of a broader process and doing the work.
Yeah, and I want to come back to this idea of values centered. I think that some of the stuff we said in this conversation can sound sort of pat, can sound sort of, you know, everybody can say, we have happy hours, or we have human interactions, we like each other, we laugh. But there's something about when there's a deep value that underlies the interactions that we have, the policies that are put in place, even if they're as small as not having back-to-back meetings, means that what we can bring to the work is anchored in these values, and how we show up with each other is reinforced by those values. It means we can believe in each other, we can hold each other accountable better, and we can make sure that what we have, the capacity that we have in that day, is not wasted on something frivolous, right? So that if we need to do 9 a.m. math class, we can say, I'm going to put this thing down because I know what I'll return to is based on our values. I think that's really profound. And it's something I've been fighting for in the performing arts for some years, but it's not something I've seen genuinely enacted in most places that I've worked, to be quite frank. Aaron, you were going to add something.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about going back to your previous question about working in, you know, white institutions or other institutions. Fortunately for me, most of my New York professional career have been in institutions of color. So there have been varying degrees of, you know, I think Eleanor said it, feeling safe. And one thing that I've noticed about High Arts is that I really truly can bring my full self to work, like to the work and to the space, because, you know, in some institutions, both white and institutions of color, I found myself, you know, feeling like having to look over my shoulder, deal with, you know, the macro and the microaggressions that are there, some of the oppressive systems that are in place that, you know, people realize, some people don't realize, you know, how I guess silencing some of these systems and aggressions are. And at High Arts, I just feel like that I can bring my full self, because what I've learned and, you know, what I feel like I've helped put in place is that when we speak about values, we're looking at we've said it before, at each other as humans and not a commodity. And even, the artists that we serve and work with, we laugh because we have a chair in the office that we call the counseling chair. And it feels like at least once during every residency, an artist will come in and have some sort of breakdown because they're so trained and used to, we're working towards this, final product or this performance, and the stress is just too much. And, we have to have, I feel like both Raymond and I have been counselors, and Nicole have been counselors all at one time about, talking to the artists and letting them know, like, this is a space for you to explore. Like, we are here to support you to explore, to play, to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Stop focusing on, what we call now a final presentation or public sharing, and not a performance. And that's, speaking of like how we articulate, the value is, we stop saying that we have a public performance of these, developmental residencies. We say that it's just a public sharing, because we're just sharing what this artist is doing in the process. And I think right there, that just changes how the artist approaches the work, because they're not working towards a final, like, professional performance. They're just, okay, we're letting the audience in on, the process, like a glimpse of what we've been doing. And I think just even like the language that we use, by changing the language, has, helped solidify, those values.
Thank you for that. And thank you for tying it in also. Not only it's 360, it's right. It's how we are as a staff. It's how the artists are brought in, and it circles back around. So we're coming close to time, and I want to just name. So Raymond said broadly, this is an exciting time for high arts. So we've had this month of high health. You can check out some things that have been going on the website. There's ongoing campaigns. Folks on staff have been challenging themselves in different kinds of things, cycling all over the world, but within New York City, sleeping every day and having a conversation with self about what that's like. Other kinds of challenges around health and wellness, and inviting you to do the same. And there'll be other talks like this one. What else should we be looking out for? And what else is new? What's going on at High Arts that relates to this conversation?
I mean, programming wise, we have, just, of course, the all of it is listed on the website, but just a lot of exciting programming coming up, really from now until the end of the year, that we can speak about, like, right now. But yeah, always follow the social media and, the website to see some of the exciting programming, the artists that we're working with, just various things that we have coming up. Once again, like, solidifying and articulating these values, but through art.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what's exciting, what I find exciting and think about the next few months, is that the work that we started in the pandemic, or the approaches that we started in the pandemic, especially around our Skylab, this remote residency, really seeing how that's continuing, what artists we're going to continue to work with in that vein. Excuse me, which artists whose work has a serious community component integrated into it. So it's not an afterthought, but this is actually part of their process. So for us, where we're located, although location is less important now because we're all remote, but being East Harlem, communities that work, artists that work with people like that live in places like East Harlem, it's important to have that community engagement, that community component to the work. So I'm excited about some of those artists that are really working in sort of theater, but also theater/performance. Work's a little more interpretive than we historically work with, but it's still within the vein of our work. So the residency work is exciting. The public art, mural project that's coming up, that's going to be exciting. Should be up in May. So we're reviewing artists for that. The full production presentation is still a little dodgy, depending on the field and access to space, and if people are going to feel comfortable coming out or not, being inside or outside or what have you. So we're also being attentive and attuned to the health concerns. But for me, I'm interested in seeing what's going to transfer, what are the through lines from the work that we started now looking forward. I'm always excited about the new kinds of artists and new kinds of work that can be housed under High Arts and really broadening these narratives and broadening the kinds of artists that we work with. That's really exciting for me. Other than that, anybody else have anything program related?
Well, I was going to say that we're hiring a program manager.
So
not quite programming related, but that job description is up on our website, and that's a new role. So our team is growing even more.
Our team is growing. Our team is also changing. It will change. As of April 2nd, I'll be stepping out of the role of executive director. I've been at High Arts for 5.5 years, probably the best professional experience I've had. And it's hard to leave, but I'm excited. I won't name the place because the announcement hasn't gone public yet, but it's really dope, and I'm super hyped about going there. And that's all I'll say for now. But as this has been a great conversation because it really has allowed me to think in a 360 full circle way about this is the way it was when we started High Arts. This is the way it is now, and thinking about really how exciting and how much runway and how much space there is for growth moving forward. That's a credit. It's a credit to the structures and the systems and the processes and all the stuff that you need for an arts nonprofit to function. But, there's been a lot of sweat equity, and, the people and the professionalism and the level, the quality of the work is also what brought us to this moment. And then underlying all of that, to be both value driven and really have the organization be about the work, I think for me it's the best thing I could ever really hope for, on my way out, is seeing the way the work is developed, the way that people engage each other, the collegiality, and the growth of the work. And it's a very, like I say, it's a very exciting time. Aaron will be taking over as interim director, executive director. So, a new chapter starts. All good things must come to an end, but it's not an end. It's more like a later peace out. I'll see you in a few kind of thing. Because I'm sticking around. I will be an ardent supporter, hardcore supporter of High Arts always. So I thank everybody for their work. Thank you for upholding the values of the organization, and I hope you all are well and continue to be well.
Thank you so much, Raymond. It's very bittersweet, and but I do think that the organization is in a great place for to handle transition and change, which is really exciting. Does anyone else have any parting words, any parting thoughts about being healthy and well in the arts, in the workplace, and with High Arts? Maybe this is a good place to leave it. But we really, this has been a great conversation for all of us to sort of reflect and share with each other. We hope that it's interesting and informative for others as well. And we hope that maybe you want to come work with us as an artist, as a program manager, or something new that we haven't heard of yet. Let us know. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.